Hello, y'all. This is Terry coming back at you. I thought I did a whole video. If I did, sorry, I'm going to be doing this again because I don't know what happened. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this again. I'm going to try to keep it quick. I figure I'll try to keep them within 30 to 45 minutes so this way people don't get bored or lose interest. So let's get started. I don't know what I'm doing quite yet. So therefore, I'm just going to wing it as I learn how to do this. On an ongoing basis. The current frame rate is too low. Please set the frame to 50. I don't know what this is. I don't know what this means. Again, so I'll figure that out later. Okay, so this is going to be kind of like a continuation of what I was talking about before. Like I said before, too, I'm going to be looking to my right when I'm speaking because I'm going to be looking at a screen. I am going to still talk about the plantation and kind of the mindset. It's more the plantation is not like a physical place. It's more of a mindset, right? It's more of the foundation of what the United States is and what it stands for. I talked about last time the triangulation of white supremacy, capitalism, and Christianity, and how those three intersect. I will in the future go a little bit more in detail with that. For now, I'm not going to touch on that until I have all my ducks in order for that because I would like to have that be more of an interactive live at some point. And right now, I don't know how to do that. So I'm still a work in progress. But as far as the plantation goes, again, this is a matter of perspective. So to begin with, I wish you guys could see the slides that I have because I did put together like a PowerPoint, and so I wanted to like just kind of explain to you. You can't see the slides; I can only see them, and so I tried to do that before, but I guess it didn't work. But I want to start off with slave submissive syndrome because this is kind of like the framework behind the plantation mindset. So, slave submissive syndrome is the pathology of psychological oppression which develops into an enslaved mindset, whether consciously or unconsciously, distorting how their submissiveness is not seen as a threat or wrongdoing. Okay. And again, when I talk about the plantation, this particular live is going to be more about the past and present of how we are still here. Okay, so when you like think of think of United States of America as a big fish tank, right? And when you're in the fish tank, you only know what's in the fish tank. You know, whether it's dirty, clean, or whatever, you're in it. And so you cannot do anything about it because that's what you're in. So, or any type of environmental factors, like even animals, they may not like living in the zoo, but they learn to adapt to the zoo, right? And so to have to take a lion out of engagement and reintroduce him to the wild, that's kind of how we are. We're like encaged in a world of white supremacy, and so, therefore, a lot of us are comfortable in it because we don't feel the direct effect of it unless you start asking questions or challenging the narrative. So, for many of you, as long as you can go around here and do what you do, whatever that is, you may not feel compelled to challenge a white supremacy system. Some of you guys have been introduced or been affected by it, but you still don't feel it like you should. And so I just want to kind of show some similarities, not only for where it started from, but how we got here. Okay, so again, we're not coming back from something. We are here. I'm just trying to, like, let's say, clean out the tank. So again, slave submissive syndrome is kind of like the more uh, conceptual terminology for a plantation mindset. So, racism versus superiority. Why this is important? Because in my years, I met a lot of white people that would say they're not racist. When you start talking about race and race relations, they get very uncomfortable. They always feel like they're being called a racist, even though they might be acting racist. And so separating even that from the noun through the verb or the adverb, depending on what how you frame it, is that racism versus superiority. So what I've come to understand, not only from just being in this United States and kind of watching things and observing things. As I said, I'm a very observational person. What I've come to understand is white people do not see themselves as racist because that is bad, but they do have a superiority complex that I believe is somewhat unconscious, right? Um, and I usually kind of kick back with the unconscious stuff because I know they're conscious of a lot of stuff, but I don't know if they're really conscious of that superiority mindset, right? Because they come into the world automatically thinking they're in charge of everything. That's why they're very curious. That's why they're nosy. That's why, I mean, just all of that kind of stuff, right? And they don't have to know what they don't need to know, right? So here's an example, because this could be anybody. If your bar is here and my bar is here, I'm going to be looking up more than I am looking down. Okay. So basically, if you're down underneath me, which I feel I'm not to say I'm think I'm better than you, but if I'm born into a world where I'm born up here and you're born down here, I don't have to look at you. So maybe I don't know what you are or what you're doing because you're beneath me, so to speak, right? So that superiority ideology is kind of like the same thing as patriarchy, right? Men on top, women on the bottom, kids underneath them. And so we kind of been conditioned to have that mentality of who's superior over who. And a lot of that is conditioning because most of us growing up, we always had white teachers, white principals, white police, white presidents, white, 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 white. And so that's what we see is what we come to know. Now, in our own community, we have leaders. Our leaders are black men usually, right? Except for some of our mothers, like our older women that we revere a lot. So we have our pastors. We may have our, dads or whoever, kingpins, whatever, whatever neighborhood you come from. There's always mostly a black man that's the leader, and then you might have a woman leader, and that could be just the woman of the block who has love for all the kids or whatever. You guys know what it is. Y'all know. So anyway, to kind of get you started with the history, there's a story about a man named John Punch, and I don't believe this is a story that was told in school. So a lot of us, including myself, I learned about this maybe a couple of years ago. Um, and one of those things that once you hear, you'll hear it again and again and again. So if you've never heard of it before, this is it. And if you have heard of it before, enjoy the ride. So in 1640, there was three men, okay, two white and one black. They all were indentured servants, okay, and they all ran away, okay. But when they got caught, the two white men had their indentured servitude extended, while the black man was confined to a life of enslavement. And this is kind of like, I guess, one of the first occurrences of really how that fork in the road happened, where the black people were not indentured anymore; they became enslaved. And then I didn't have this on here, but there was a thing that I read where any person, any child born to a black woman was automatically enslaved. But over years and years and years, as the population grew bigger and bigger and bigger, they increased the codes and the laws of what slavery is, and that's where eventually they came up with the one drop rule. So keep in mind the name is John Punch, and he was sentenced to serve a said master for his natural life. And so this is the case that has been known for the legal transition from blacks becoming indentured to lifetime enslaved. So what I have here to my right again is what I've been introducing, kind of, or speaking, and where I'm going in the future with trying to educate or whatever to the people in the community about how we're on the plantation, where it started from, where we're at, and the correlation between the two. So slave codes, if you haven't heard of them and you're hearing about them for the first time, became the foundation of how black people became a suppressed group. Okay. So this is the beginning of the racial double standards in the United States of America. Okay. This is the beginning. So pre Civil War, here are the following. These are not all of them, but this is the main ones. So in the beginning, define enslavement, people as property. So remember before I mentioned that we weren't just slaves, we were property. Okay. So when they talk about in I think it's either the Declaration of Independence or the United States Constitution, one of them speaks to a man and his property. We were the property, and white women were property too. Children were property, but mainly us because we were bought and sold. Okay, so we were property. Laws established that enslaved people were property that could be bought, sold, and passed down, meaning that if Master Johnson or Williams was to pass away, then his son or his grandson or whoever would get that slave or that whole bunch of slaves. So an example of that would be Thomas Jefferson. That's why I call him the godfather of white supremacy, because when Thomas Jefferson married his wife, I think her name was Virginia or Elizabeth. It was one of the two. She brought with her um her dad's slaves. So she couldn't have like her own slaves. She had to marry. Because white women couldn't really get down like that back then. So she had slaves that she brought with her to Thomas Jefferson. Ironically, I don't know how many of you know this or not. Sally Hemings, the slave girl that Thomas Jefferson was, I guess they found out he was the father of these children. The one that he was like sexually or molesting, right? Because she was a child, and she was also his wife's half sister, but she was a slave to the plantation, meaning the indiscretions of the white male who fathered her through his interactions with an enslaved woman. So Thomas Jefferson basically was sleeping with his wife's half sister, although she was a slave, what they call a child of the plantation. And I don't know if I mentioned this before, but that's just the half breed children on the plantation that were born of rape. Okay. Restricted basic freedoms. They prohibited enslaved people from marrying, traveling, owning property, and being educated. Okay, so this is the starting point when the United States of America started coming into fruition, and when blacks were being now enslaved. These are some restrictions that they had. They could not just go where they wanted to go when they wanted to go, and they could not marry who they wanted to marry, and they could not own property, and they could not be educated. Right. So that again, when you look at today's time and how things work, a lot of that stuff, like we finna get back to this traveling stuff. So let me get there. I'll get there in a minute. Controlled movement and assembly. Laws limited their movement by requiring travel passes. Again, we're getting ready to go back here. So this is why I'm bringing this up today. And restricted their ability to gather in groups. Another rule that I'm going to talk about a little bit later. And then prohibited rights against white people, meaning that as black people, we are forbidden to testify against white people in court, and we could not own weapons. So back then, when what defined us as enslaved people are these four areas. Okay, that was the beginning of the slave codes. Now let's go to the post Civil War. So now we got the black codes because we're not slaves anymore. So now we're black. So the black codes, which started between 1865 and 1866, granted some of our civil rights. So they granted us to be able to uh, marry on our own legally. We didn't have to get the masses' permission to marry. We were now allowed to own land, even though most of the time they burnt it up and burnt it down by burning our fields and our profits, or charging us ridiculously high leases and rents, which they still do to this day. And we had a concession to new reality of freedom, which included like getting education, right? Even though it was sparingly, we still were allowed to learn how to read and write without being murdered or killed. And when I say killed versus killed, I mean that. Okay, killed, past tense, killed, mean like kill, kill, kill. So I usually put the T on there, just for emphasis, right? I don't know from a linguistic standpoint where black folks add the S or the T. The T is like period. Well, I say cute, so that's what I mean by that. Restricted labor and movement. Oh, let me go back. So created a system of control, right? So here we go. So they use laws like vagrancy statutes to arrest and force unemployed African Americans into labor to secure cheap workforce for white landowners. So this was the beginning of mass incarceration. So in case y'all did not know this, this is for people who don't know. Historically, black codes is what created a mass incarceration system right after freedom. So after they freed us from the Emancipation Proclamation, not Juneteenth, the Emancipation Proclamation is what freed us initially. Juneteenth is another conversation for another day. We were freed by the Emancipation Proclamation January 1st, 1863. When they figured out like, oh man, how we gonna afford to live and how we gonna afford to pay these people, they end up using vagrancy. So vagrancy looked like this. If Thomas, I'm using the name Thomas, if Thomas was a blacksmith, where he was able to do welding, horseshoes, and stuff like that. In order to create a barrier from Thomas getting work, now Thomas had to possess a license or some type of certification, showing that he was a skilled laborer. So in order to get that, you had to pay for it. And if you don't have a job, you can't pay for it. Okay. And so when you look at how our systems work today, certain things require training and life. Now, I'm not saying that it's not that we should not be trained to do stuff, but before we had to, we didn't have to, if you get what I mean. So over the years, and one of the things I have said too, in time, like in different settings, is every time they raise the bar on us, they really raise it on themselves, and we're seeing that now. So every time they raise the bar on us, they raise it on themselves. So when you talk about, like I was saying earlier, if I don't know what happened to that video, but what I was saying earlier is a lot of my sisters, black women, two things that we do and do well. One, we become certified nursing assistants when we should be RNs, registered nurses. But the barrier for that is to become a licensed registered nurse, right? Instead of a certified CNA. So, and then teachers. Black women, before all of this stuff came to be, we were already being teachers and nurses, good ones at that. But then when they figured out, in order to create this barrier, they created a system where we had to have licenses and certifications. And so that's how it kind of held us back, because either we couldn't afford them or they made it where we couldn't go into those classes, right? So of course, if we have vagrancy, if we can't get work, then that because they lock us up to pay for what we can't pay for. And so the bad thing about this is, for black mothers who may have had children during periods of incarceration, those children will also become a ward of the state. So now they're back enslaved again. So it becomes a vicious cycle. Restricted labor movements was laws restricted the types of jobs black people could hold. Still almost like that today. So when white folk like Trump said like black jobs. Now, according to people like him, black jobs was once upon a time being maids, housekeepers, landscapers, um, um, and agricultural work. Right, that's what blacks were permitted to do. Maybe drivers, stuff like that. However, in time, when affirmative action and stuff like that changed, we were permitted to do other jobs. And so the next group of people that came in were like the Hispanics or Latin people. And then now the Latin people do most of those jobs, and they too are trying to come up on the work chain. Okay. And so a lot of stuff, the barriers. So DEI, which was another like a reboot of affirmative action, but instead on leadership levels, that's when they killed that too, because they were like, we're not answering to black folks. And again, when I said before, Obama, Kamala Harris, Ketanji Brown Jackson, all of those black folks who broke the concrete ceiling, white folks wasn't feeling that. So that's why we got Trump again. And then so continued restrictions still prohibiting from us testifying against white people. And lo and behold, that still resonates today. Honest to God, it still does. And so I know personally from experience that if I said something, I put something in writing about this white person doing something to me, nothing is going to be done. Nothing. The thing that they'll say is, well, it wasn't intentional, or did you talk to that person, or whatever. Then you go talk to that person, they tell on you saying that you were being aggressive. Next thing you know, you in trouble. I kid you not. And laid the foundation for Jim Crow. So the black codes actually kind of bled into the Jim Crow, what they call Jim Crow. And for those of you who don't know, again, share these videos with who you think needs them. But for Jim Crow was a minstrel show. Jim Crow was blackface. That's why blackface is offensive to this day. Nobody talks about why though. They say, "Oh, these white kids putting blackface on with these red lips, and ooh, they shouldn't be doing that." Well, why should they not do it? We got to tell the whole thing. You can't just say you can't do something. Tell why. That started Jim Crow. Jim Crow started for white men, uh, putting on blackface to try to mimic how black people were when they weren't like that. They were just trying to make it look like they were like that, like buffoons and stupid. And Jim Crow was the name of they called the minstrel show. And so I don't have the name in front of me of the guy who first was like popular for it, but there was a guy who made it famous, and then you had other guys who kind of followed suit with trying to do these minstrel shows because they caught on with white people being entertained by black behavior. And they still do that now. It's called being ghetto. That's what they call it, or being hood. When they mock us, as being talking black and acting black, that's the history of how Jim Crow started in blackface. So there's always a starting point, and then we need to know that. So the backlash to these codes led to Civil Rights Act of 1866. So there was one, that was the Reconstruction Act. 1866 was a Reconstruction Act, and that didn't last long. I think that lasted no more than 11 years. And then the 14th Amendment came into play, and that's something we got to pay close attention to because they've been talking about changing that changing the 14th Amendment. Okay, they've been talking about it because that's the amendment that is provides residency, like the citizenship for naturalization. That's the word I'm looking for, naturalization and citizenship. And but the failure of Reconstruction allowed many of the same restrictions to be revived under Jim Crow law. So a lot of stuff continues to go grow like mold in this country. A lot of so if you see the correlation between the slave codes that led into the black codes. So now I want to show or say, because you can't see what I'm looking at, I want to show you how the black codes translate into today's time, right? So when I say we are still on a plantation, this is how it looks: vagrancy, unemployment. What happens to people who are usually unemployed? I don't mind is a devil's playground. So when a person ain't working, they up to no good. They up to mischief, right? So again, a lot of people could be unemployed because they don't have the ability to get license or certifications to work, right? You got a lot of people that have to go into different type of programs to drive forklift or become a welder or become an electrician or something like that. I had to get a license to become a counselor. I had to take an exam that cost $250, and I didn't pass it the first time. And I want to get into that another day. But that was expensive, right? And then you got to keep those licenses up every 2 years. I got three of them. So that means I got to pay $88 a year for one of them, and then 75 every 2 years. That's $150 every 2 years. I got to pay for a license, including insurance for that license, which is almost $400 a year, and then membership to ACA and NAADAC NADAC or whatever. So it's expensive. It's expensive to do this work. Okay. So again, vagrancy. People be unemployed because you might need work boots. You might need transportation. You might need a lot of stuff. So it's easy to be unemployed in this country. And so now, right now, since Trump been in office, the employment rate is plummeting. It's plummeting because he's killing America with not having jobs and stuff and these tariffs and stuff. So people are losing jobs. People are getting laid off. And we're not going to have nothing. Then loitering, the correlation of loitering from past to present is it was illegal for more than 3 black men to stand in a group. Okay. Not necessarily really illegal, like they didn't have a law saying against it, but it was just a thing where, like a code, again, a code, a conduct. 3 black men, if they got 3 or 4 black men standing in a group, they must be up to something. Okay. Versus 3 or 4 white men. So if you got 3 or 4 white men, nothing, nothing at all, right? But if you got 3 or 4 black men, all of a sudden it's like, what are they up to? They look suspicious. What's going on? And they could be in suits and ties, and they'll still be like, what are they doing? What's going on? What are they doing? So that again, so loitering, that law of loitering was really for us. We were not allowed to stand in 3 or 4s back in the day. And even now, to this day, you got some young guys standing around. What do they do? Break it up, young men. But if they're white boys, they don't say nothing. And that's just real. Annual labor contracts. What is that? Temp services. That's the same thing, right? So back in the day, annual labor contracts, meaning that they'll hire you, for a contract. Like either they'll pay you to work on their land, or they'll pay you, or they'll rent their land out to you for ridiculous amounts of money. So you'll never get ahead. But again, temp services is that way too, where, and not saying temp services are for black people, but temp services are usually for marginalized people. So guys getting out of prison, girls getting out of prison, people that have poor employment history, or these just things like that. But primarily, it is like when the Industrial Revolution bellied up and a lot of factories moved out of town, the new factory jobs go to temp services. So it takes a lot to get hired into those temp services and be unionized and stuff. And so again, that's a barrier. That's a barrier that usually falls short for black people. Enslavement by debt, restitution. That's what restitution is. Enslavement by debt. Or like I was saying too, like check cashing places, right? Or borrowing money, robbing Peter to pay Paul. Robbing Peter to pay Paul. Lil Sean, turn on that light for me, please. I'm still on video, but turn on that light. So enslavement by debt is considered restitution. Parents who did not allow their children to work were considered unfit, and the state received these children as orphans. So again, i.e., payment. Okay, they used to do the same thing, called child protective services now. Back in the day, if you could not afford something, they'll take your child for collateral and have to work. You got to use your child to work your debt off too. So that's another form of enslavement. And even though they don't really have children, they're going to start doing that again. They're almost starting to do that now. They're going to start that again. Because I know I heard a while back that they were supposed to be incorporating like the legal law for children working again. Because, they said they're rolling back everything. They're rolling everything back. Kept black people under surveillance. So again, the black code, when they kept black people under surveillance of their comings and goings, what is that called? Probation. That's what it's called. Or the police. You don't have the police driving around in the white communities like you do the black communities. And it's not saying them white kids ain't bad. They bad too. They just don't police them like they police us. Again, the difference, right? And blacks were prevented from suing or bringing cases before court. Again, that's another issue where we kind of get the snitches need stitches, because we could only tell on each other. We couldn't tell on them. And if we did tell on them, it was going on deaf ears. And then the last one is the Casual Killing Act of 1669, where the Casual Killing Act is where it was legalized to accidentally kill your slave, right? So you may not intentionally meant to kill them, but in the act of punishing them, if they died, then that was a casual killing. You didn't mean to kill them, you accidentally killed them. Now, before Obama, using Rodney King as an example of the late 90s, early 90s, police used to beat us to death. They beat us to death if they were lucky to beat us to death. Most of the time, they just beat us, right? And they still beating. And then if they died, it would be like a casual killing act. So you see the parallels in that. You see the correlation in past and present behaviors. Now going back to the situation with regards to telling on white folks. Um, what I shared in a video that I did not post, I shared a time when I was working for Genesis Behavioral Health as a alcohol and drug counselor, and I was a full time um, intensive outpatient counselor. Okay, and they decided to start a PM program. So I ended up volunteering. I started off volunteering to do the 9 to 9. And I did that for about 3 months until they hired somebody. Now, at first, in the Milwaukee area, not to say not in the other areas, but the Milwaukee area, in the office that I worked out of downtown was mostly all black staff. Matter of fact, women. Okay, there was like one black male at one point in time, but for the most part, it was all mostly black women. And then at some point, when more white women started getting substance abuse counseling licenses, which again, that's a whole nother conversation for another day. I promise you. When they started trying to get AODA licenses to practice substance abuse counseling, they started hiring white people for the Milwaukee office. And my experience had been one of my earlier white people experiences was they finally hired a white girl to work at the office, and she came in on vacation. I don't know about y'all, but I always worked with white people that come in the job on vacation. I don't know what that means. So she one of the other white girls told her to ask me to fill in those her hours while she go on vacation. I said, no, you just got hired. I ain't even had a vacation. You just got hired, and I've been working these 9 to 9s for 3 or 4 months. No, I can't do it. So she went to HR. HR came to my office to me, sat me down, and wrote me up for not being a team player. Literally wrote me up for not being a team player. I kid you not. And of course, when I was telling you about the last time that I don't get fired, but I do get kind of to the point I have to leave, that's what happens. Like y'all, I'm sitting up here, I worked 3 or 4 months for y'all from 9 to 9, and then you gonna write me up for not being a team player because I told this girl no to work her own shift. So yeah, I had an attitude after that. After that, everybody was a bitch in the office. Everybody. I ain't like nobody after that. And so I mean, looking back, I probably wouldn't have did anything any different. I probably would have been as aggressive, but like for real, like you gonna tell on me, and then I'm gonna get written up for not being a team player after working 4 months, 9 to 9. Okay, anyway, I'm gonna digress with that. But that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Then so I'm gonna go into these amendments real quick because I don't want to go over 45 minutes. Right now I'm at 34. So the Fourth Amendment. So I'm going into the Constitution now, and I'll probably do this a little bit different next time. I wish you could see it. So the Fourth Amendment is search and seizure or arrest, right? And so right now, what we're seeing is the violation of that, which is ICE. Okay, ICE is kind of like the violation of search and seizure because they're not coming with warrants. They just kicking in doors and snatching people out their houses. And let me say this to you who are black. Just because they're doing it to the Latin people don't mean they're not kicking in our doors next. Please receive and believe. They're just going to come a little bit more hardcore when they come to get us. Because they already talk about homegrowns. And I'm just going to keep on reiterating this. Who do you think are the homegrowns? Okay, when they ready, they're strategically right now putting together a task force or military people who volunteering to do this to start kicking in our doors next. So just know, are snatching this off the street. Please know that that's going to happen real soon. Okay, and um, by next year, it's also going to require that citizens carry passports. Now, I know some people are like, "That's extreme. That ain't gonna happen." Whatever. This president's position is extreme, and there's nothing that has not been done already. That's like, what the going on here, right? So like, don't do that. If let's say if even if this was an exaggeration of truth, still keep it in the front of your brain, because I would hate for you to be like riding down the street minding your business, bumping your song, and all of a sudden you get pulled over, snatched out, and thrown on the ground, and it's legal. Okay, so we'll require citizens to carry passports. So if you don't have a passport, just for the sake of argument, try now to go get one, because by the time they enforce it, you don't want to have to be waiting in a locked up facility, wherever that is, to get a passport. So go ahead and try to get it now. The next one is the amendment of number 6. Now, again, I never heard this said, or if this is how it is. This is just my theoretical perception of what the Amendment 6 violation is. So, and they never mention it like this. So when they say a right to a fair trial, right? That's the Sixth Amendment, right to a fair trial. Killing unarmed black men and women is a violation of this amendment. It has to be. Because you're not getting a right to a fair trial. When a police officer shoots you down unarmed for something that you don't even know you're guilty of, or if you are even guilty of, that's not rights to a fair trial, because you never make it. You're never going to make it. And so, in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial, not death, but a trial, by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed. Peer, a jury of my peers. I don't know about y'all. I never did jury duty because I always get myself out of it because I don't want to be on a jury duty. But a jury duty is not really your peers, the way I define peers. The jury is picked by the prosecutor and the DA, or the defendant in the defense and the DA. Them are not my peers. I don't know these people. They don't live like I live. They don't know how, they don't know me. So usually you're not being defended by your peers. You're being defended by people they pick. Okay? Not as bad as it was maybe 50, 60 years ago, but hell, they're still horrible. Okay? The next amendment is 8. So the 8th amendment is not having excessive bail, fines, or punishment, no cruel and unusual punishment. Again, like amendment 6, if you are killed by law enforcement officers, that is cruel and unusual. Okay, that's excessive, and so that kind of goes back into the legal lies of the killing of the slave while correcting them. So if you are talking about killing, like the legal killing of a person that has not been accused of anything, and even if they were, they're supposed to have the right to representation, and that's what they're saying now. Like, they're kicking in doors, they're pulling people out. They're not even knowing if they're legal or not, and so that's the kind of stuff that is creating havoc. And it's not going to stop with them. It's just not. It's not going to stop with them. And so we have to keep it up. You can let her come around. You can keep it up as to what the Casual Killing Act of 1669 and how it's still being executed, right, by police officers killing people before they're charged or convicted. And then so again, just kind of going back and forth as to um how we have to start paying attention to these new things. Okay, so these are things to pay attention to right now and going forward. The Heritage Foundation. These are the authors of Project 2025. I will probably never read Project 2025 unless I'm made to. Other than that, I don't think I'm ever gonna read it. Um, but just it's white supremacy. It's a boohoo document of white people, white men primarily feeling like they're being replaced by people of color. So it's a whole bunch of BS that they put together that's gonna jack us up eventually. And so while people want to walk around here pretending that this stuff ain't real, wait on it. Just wait on it. You'll see soon. And so I suggest you do your research. They are the people behind the Project 2025 and the money funding the MAGA movement. They're behind the MAGA agenda. Okay, make America great again. Donald J. Trump, prior to President Obama, was a Democrat. He used to be a Democrat. He stopped being one when Obama became president for the Democratic Party. And then that's when he started MAGA. And like I said, when I said Donald Trump be plagiarizing, he plagiarized Make America Great Again because that's what Ronald Reagan said when he was in office. And even though they try to make Ronald Reagan not a racist, he was a racist too, because he's the one that coined the term welfare queen, and he was also the person that crack cocaine was under his administration. And I strongly believe that he, Bush, and this recent death of Cheney all had a lot to do with everything going wrong back then. They were some crooks. Them were some criminals. Okay, they were some criminals. And so I think it's Cheney who just died recently. Don't tell me they ain't had nothing to do with 9/11. Please don't tell me they had nothing to do with 9/11. Even if it had anything to do with arms deals, right? So they didn't pull the trigger, but they sure had something to do with how they got the guns, okay? And again, like, we can't do nothing about it because everything is classified, conspiracy, classified lies. All of that is the same. Pete Hegseth, Secretary of War. Now, originally, it used to be National Security Act or the Secretary of Defense, but he decided to call it Secretary of War again because that's what they're getting ready to start doing. They're getting ready to take us to war, but it's not going to be war against another country. It's going to be war with homegrowns. And so, kind of going into skipping forward with Qatar, I think I mentioned this in the first video I did with Qatar, which is a country, an Arab country. Now, here's the thing that's so controversial. Are you for Muslims or against Muslims? I don't get it. Like Qatar, like I don't. It's a lot of stuff that's so contradictory, and it just makes no sense. But just pay attention again to the narrative. The Qatar people gave Trump this luxurious airplane as a gift, but it wasn't a gift. It was payment to have a military base in Idaho. So, again, I'm not trying to be an extremist. I'm just saying you're going to invite an outside Arab country that you claim are terrorists. You claim that, I don't. You're going to bring a Arab country to set up shop in the United States. Why? And who are they here for? Why would you want them to have a military base? Why would you want to have a country like Qatar, who you have called terrorists, have a military base in the United States? And Idaho kind of sits in the middle. Again, I think I said this before, and I probably keep reiterating it. And so you get a plane to have this military base built in the middle of Idaho for what? Are you going to have them become the people who police the communities of color and the plane fly us to other places? I mean, let's be real here. What is this all about? And again, if people are sitting at home thinking that ain't gonna happen, that ain't gonna happen, I don't believe that. Okay, slavery happened, Jim Crow happened, apartheid happened, Holocaust happened, Trump happened twice, the insurrection happened. So you tell me what ain't gonna happen. I'm just saying, why would they need to have Qatar have a military base in the United States? And I said this before, so I don't know what happened to the video, and I know I'm at 45 minutes, so I gotta go. When you bring a foreign entity into your country, and from the history of them partnering with these other countries with arms deals and stuff, like 9/11, for instance, how are they gonna get them out of this country if they start to not do the agreement? Like, what's going to hold them to the agreement once they in this country? How are you going to get that military base out of here when things go wrong? Because the ideal thing would be is, yeah, we're going to help you get rid of all your blacks, your browns, your Hispanics, your Latin, your everybody. We're going to keep the model of minorities, and then we're going to get rid of all the homegrowns. Do you think them Qatar people ain't going to try to take the United States over once all the black folks and everybody gone? That's really kind of the threat here, which really we're not the threat. White people, no disrespect to you, but y'all gangster. Y'all the threats. Y'all the dangerous ones. Y'all know that. And y'all are, period. Um, and so what's gonna happen what's gonna happen to the United States of America when they move these people into the United States? What's gonna happen? Okay. Um, so again, I want to also end with saying the Civil War of the 18th century was white against white people, not white against black people. I'm going to say this again. Civil War was not white against black. It was white against white on behalf of ending slavery. Okay? So keep that on the front of your temple, your node. Also, 2026 next year is an election year, a very, very, very important election year. And that's the year where a lot of stuff is going to have to be hashed out. It's going to be very important because two things is going to happen. One, if the Republicans are going to end up staying in office, they're going to finish tearing this country up to shreds. And then two, if they don't win, they're going to tear this country up to shreds. So either way it goes, it's a lose-lose situation. So call to action. The call to action would be to start educating people on voting rights, uh, and future revisions of the Constitution that's going to be needed, right? And that could look like term limits, 25th Amendment. And let me just say the whole United States Constitution needs not to be revised, repealed, upheld. It needs to be torn up in little bitty pieces, shredded with a double-edged shredder, and eliminated and started all over from scratch. And the reason why I say that is, think about a jacket that you love to death and you keep trying to patch it up, patch it up, patch it up. By the time you keep trying to patch it up, you're going to have to end up throwing it away. And that's the United States Constitution as we know of it today. And so for the 25th Amendment that speaks to the President of the United States, it went from a period where if the president was found to be treasonous, they would execute him. And then they changed that law to impeach him. But here's the thing, Trump was already impeached 2 times before, and he's still president again with a whole bunch of felonies and all the other kind of mess he's doing. So that whole amendment needs to change. And it also has to include that none of his party or administration can also take over if something happens to him. Once he's gone, they all need to be gone. Because I don't want JD Vance either. At all, period. I don't want him. I don't want none of them. Pete Hegseth would be the third one in charge. No, 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 no. If you know who these people are, we like Pookie said in New Jack City, Scotty, I'm gonna die. That's where we're at, y'all. So I will always end with a quote. I might start with a quote or I might end with a quote. But today I'm going to end with a quote by one of my favorite people. And his name is Malcolm X. So Malcolm X said, I am not against peace. I am against the peace that means staying quiet while my people suffer. Okay? And so I am going to be that voice, whether people want to hear it or not. I will be back and I will continue to try to bring stuff that needs to be said. I have nothing to lose at this point. We have a lot to lose, but I don't have nothing to lose at this point because, again, what he said was, I am not against peace. I am not. I'm not here. I'm not here to be the culprit. I'm against a peace that means staying quiet while my people suffer, even when they don't know they're suffering. Again, I could have saved a whole lot of slaves if they knew they were slaves. Harriet Tubman. I'm out.